Hello, Pucks of Plenty here, also known as Mixed Pucks, and I'm going to go ahead and get things started for SexualiTea. So I'm really excited about our new edition of SexualiTea. So let me grab my colleague, Mia Fine, and we'll get started. Hope everyone is doing beautifully on this fantastic Wednesday evening, wherever you are at in the world. Hi, lovelies. Waving. Just a moment, we can bring in Mia and get started with SexualiTea. And if you don't know what SexualiTea is and you're hanging out, hi. SexualiTea is a podcast that I do with a good friend of mine and colleague, Mia Fine. And together, together, do this podcast together. And we've been going strong now for well over a month. And we do mini-casts every other week. So, hi, Mia.
Hello. I was on my other Instagram. I apologize, Kia.
That's okay.
How's it going?
It's going good. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. Well, I'm sorry I interrupted what you were saying.
Oh, no, you're good. You're absolutely good.
Yeah, well, welcome, folks. Thanks for joining Kia and me today. It's good to see all of your names popping up on our Instagram here. Brief introduction. Kia, would you like to go first, or you want me to?
Yes, I can jump in. Yeah, I can. I'm Mixed Pucks of Plenty, also Kia, and I am a sex educator. I've been involved in the BDSM and sex positive community in the Seattle area now, almost a decade, and I run a femdom group called Diadem Events, and we do education and play parties and things like that. And yeah, that's me.
Awesome. And I'm Mia Fine. I'm a certified sex therapist and educator in Seattle. I specialize in working with diversity and sexual expression, as well as sexual health concerns. And super grateful to be here with Kia. And today we get to talk about polyamory and parenting, which I'm stoked about.
Yes.
Yeah, so if you have any questions as we get started, you are more than welcome just to pop those in the chat box, and we'll address them as we move into it. So
absolutely.
Yeah. And Kia, are you open to sharing a little bit about your experience with polyamory?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have I trying to figure out the right word to describe being polyamorous. I guess I've been kind of defaulting to I have been practicing polyamory. Hi, it's Indigo Blue. I've been practicing polyamory or ethical non-monogamy for about 7 years. My current situation, I have 4 romantic partners and 1 non-romantic partner.
Cool.
And I live with 2 of them.
And
so, yes.
And how long have you been polyamorous or identified openly as polyamorous?
I've been out publicly as polyamorous probably about 6 years. At that first year, I don't think I was quite sure, but yeah, then it took.
After about 6, and here we are. Awesome. And you have a kiddo.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Gabriel is 10. Did I get that?
Yes.
10.
Gabriel is 10 years old. So I have been actively non-monogamous for the majority of his life.
Okay, cool. Would it be helpful to start with some of our psychoeducation about polyamory, or do you want to talk more or start about your experience with it? What would feel good for you?
I think we should talk about the kind of this. I think that we should get into the technical aspect and then get into the personal. I think that would be good. for this, especially because people might have questions, and I think that's kind of a good place to get started.
Absolutely. I think that's great. We have a couple of resources too that we'll share on Instagram and as well verbally at the end of our live IG, and some really great articles that we have access to. So we're super happy to share that piece. And I work with a lot of relationship systems or relational systems where folks either are monogamous and then are moving into some aspect of non-monogamy. And this question comes up quite frequently. The idea of, well, how do I move into non-monogamy with grace and care, knowing that there are going to be hurdles, and because we're all human. And,
Yes.
And then also, how do we talk about it with children? This isn't something I've personally experienced. I don't have human children, and so I haven't had that conversation. However, we're walking with clients through this is one of the joys. Some of the ideas that we've got around how to manage that conversation is to be selective about the folks with whom you do introduce partners. Be selective about the partners. And having that conversation with partners ahead of time. Hey, how do you feel about introduction to my kiddo or kiddos? And having that awareness first, and then really creating that space for the kiddo and for partners with intentionality.
Absolutely. Another thing that you want to do is you want to go slow and let the new adults blend in with each other. Typically, we recommend like at gatherings or parties or things like that. If in terms of introducing children, I'll give a personal example here. The first time I introduced Gabriel to one of my partners, we were at a wrestling party at someone's house watching wrestling, and my son was playing with My Little Ponies. So I'm definitely doing parenting right. And because friendship is magic. And one of my partners is he's a brony, and so he was able to connect with my son that way. And so they played with the My Little Ponies while the wrestling was happening, and it was just it was not a whole lot of pressure on my son. So you want to make sure that you're doing that in a way that's being intentional, and also just not putting too much pressure on the situation. Kids are smart. They know when they're being set up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And they can read into it. So that's that, like having that conversation ahead of time and that intentionality around it. And like in a setting that seems natural and fun. Like, I think that is a really rad one to be around my Little Ponies and have that.
Friendship is magic.
I love that. Also,
and
My Little Ponies are magic. So
right.
Yeah.
And then this leads into let the kids take the lead. In that particular example, my son was definitely leading the conversation. He was leading the style of play, and it really allowed my partner, this particular partner, to see a part of me that isn't me, and see another part of my life. Especially a lot of my partners a few years ago, I met them mostly through my BDSM play and stuff like that. So they're, used to seeing me in a completely different box. And so seeing me as mom, that's different. That's a whole different ball game. And for some folks, that might be too much. So you want to make sure that you set some realistic expectations on what might happen, that's important.
Yeah, and also that part of letting the kid take the lead, asking questions. So inviting questions around their awareness, like what is it that comes to mind for them, what's interesting, and also like responding with questions about like how they're feeling or what feels kind of those open-ended. It's similar to engaging in conversations around sex and sex positivity with your kids. Kia wrote a kick-ass article recently that we were just talking about last night. That is just, it's so wonderful. And part of that is that idea that conversations with kiddos around sex is not just a one-time thing. It goes, is like constant, right? And the invitation is, and I share this with my clients, is when we have relationships with people in our family, the idea is that they can come to us and ask us anything, right?
Yeah.
And especially that relationship dynamic between parent and kid, if you are a person who's intentional about creating safety, your kiddo's going to come to you and talk about sex if they're open to it. And depending on developmental stages and the kiddo. Don't want to generalize
Absolutely.
with everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I've been talking about is that the talk is plural, and the talk happens at different times, and the talk is sometimes you don't talk, sometimes you listen, and you want to make sure, especially when we're talking about introducing different people in your life, we're hoping that at this point, you know, if you're getting to this point where you're introducing people to your kids, that you know that you're picking someone to be around your child that, you know, is safe and things like that. But raising our kids to feel comfortable talking to us, coming to us. So if something is wrong or something isn't right, or they're uncomfortable about something, they don't feel like they're not going to be heard or trusted or seen. So creating that space. So be honest with your child, also be flexible. One of the things I tell folks all the time is I don't really do hierarchy in my polyamory anymore, except for one part. And hierarchy basically means, right, that like there's positions, right? And so putting people at different statuses or different levels. Mm-hmm. And so in my poly, I don't have that except for one thing. I consider my relationship with my son to be the highest relationship that I have right now. Mm-hmm. He did not consent to being brought here. And so it is my job to provide that safety and comfort and be a sounding board for him. Yes. And someone down here. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we have someone sharing how, got to make sure the little one feels safe. And sometimes they're too scared and embarrassed to talk about anything sexual. Absolutely. Yeah, that point of not wanting to generalize that if you create that space that they're necessarily going to feel comfortable. But if there's dialogue that's consistent, then it offers them the awareness that there isn't anything that's off of the table. That they can come to you if and when they feel comfortable about it, that you're that book there, right? And absolutely, and you're steady, right? So
yeah, well, and that goes with if you are already establishing this open dialogue that we're thinking about, having these conversations around sexuality and gender expression and identity and all of that. If we're constantly having these conversations, if you're getting to a point and a place in your life where you're going to introduce a partner to your child, this is just another part of that conversation. I don't want to use the word lump, but I think about my poly arrangements and things like that in the same vein I think of non-traditional families, and because they're non-traditional families. And I'm always telling my son that, families are not always, a mom, a dad, 2.5 kids, a dog, and a cat. There are all different types of families and different types of relationships.
I love that. So. Yeah. And, Alina Gabosh, who's, I know both of our mentor, a mentor that we have, says that no matter what, family is who you choose. You even choose family whose blood. And so it's that idea of, we choose who's in our life, and one thing we can control is how we show up in that world, right? And in that relationship.
Absolutely.
So that's really beautiful. Yeah. I love that idea that you just pointed out around Gabriel didn't consent to come into the world. And so he is, and when it comes to hierarchy, he's your number one.
Yep. Right? He is the priority. And it's all of my choices are based off of what is going to keep me safe to continue to be here for the person that has the most consent things, right? And that's the child. So I think that's really important, is letting your kid know that, that they're going to come first, that they're not going to get lost in the shuffle and they're not going to get forgotten about. I think that's really important. And also, again, because we're having these open dialogues, we're having these types of conversations, this, in theory should help with lessening shame, and really
Yes.
we really want to reject shame in so many different facets of our sexuality and our expression, right?
So
I feel like a lot of things that get in our way and allow us to, you know, be is shame.
hmm
And so we really want to make sure that when our kids are coming to us and asking us questions, when we're talking to our children, that we're coming from a place that is not shameful or making it
Beautiful.
seem like it's shameful.
Yeah. I have a friend, Charlie, who says often where there's a should, there's shame. So
Mm-hmm.
wherever we hear, I should be doing this, or things are supposed to be a particular way, generally there's guilt and shame around that.
Mm-hmm.
And I tend to, I really like love that thought.
Yeah.
And it invites us to queer up, right? To question, which is that term queer I use as question.
Yeah.
How we know what we think we know, and
Mm-hmm.
dismantling binaries and dismantling the either or of things, because those messages that many of us grew up with definitely play a part. So what we get to do is undo a lot of the shame. That's a lot of the work I get to do with folks. Yeah, and you're doing
Absolutely.
too.
Yeah, I feel like especially when we were allowed to all be together and be at events, one of the things that I felt like that kind of became it's part of the job of hosting is new folks showing up to spaces unsure, and you're picking up on the shame.
Yeah,
You're definitely picking up on the shame and the shoulds and the coulds and the woulds, and it's really, really interesting.
I
Really,
love it.
really interesting.
And someone here also, the side you had thank you for all your comments, you're awesome, is
Yeah.
talking about preparing to have the anything about sex talk. And is grateful they're popping in, and that's so rad. And again, we're happy to offer resources. Sex Positive Families is a kick-ass resource that I know Key and I both really
Mm-hmm.
recommend. And there are like Sex is a Funny Word is a great book too. That is quite digestible if you're considering using a book for starting that conversation. I could
Yeah.
not recommend those two more.
Yeah, we do have a resource that we'll put up. It's a list of books to if you're trying to bring up the subject of polyamory and things like that with your children. And I believe this list, I have a couple. There's a list that separates it out by like age appropriateness, which is pretty neat too. And there's a lot of really great books that aren't specifically about poly, but are about non-traditional families that will really, really that I think that if you are coming at this, it's new and you're coming at this and it's your first time doing this and you're not quite sure, I feel like that's a really great place to start. So we'll make sure that we get those resources up, because I think that's really, really good, is to make sure that you have just being able to have access to media and resources that reflect your values. And I
Mm-hmm.
think we're gonna have to do a whole thing about sex positive parenting, because
Yeah,
this
I
is so
love
hand
it.
in hand with it, right? But the thing with sex positive parenting, the very first thing that I feel like folks should do is figure out what your values are in terms of sexuality
Mm-hmm.
and gender and all that stuff, because that is what's going to guide you in these conversations that you're having with your children. And this is like that's the beauty of sex positive parenting, that it's opening you and your child up to being able to have these conversations that are not just about a penis going into a vagina. Like, it affects so many other aspects of their life. Consent especially affects so many different aspects of our child's life. Knowing that you have autonomy of your body goes beyond just sex,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's pretty brilliant. And it's if we're having these conversations already, by the time we get to this point of, oh, by the way, mommy has a boyfriend and a girlfriend and stuff like that, your kid will probably be able to digest that information. And honestly, depending on the age, the kid probably won't process it in a shameful way anyway. They'll just probably, unless you are reflecting that. So that's something else to be mindful of too.
And we're healing from shame. And the reality is everyone's going to fuck up, right? Like
Yep.
there isn't a way to do this perfectly, right? And so kind of getting away from that idea of perfection, or that I'm not going to do this
Mm-hmm.
exactly how I'd anticipated or intended. We're all doing the best we can. And so it's an
Absolutely.
invitation to be human, and shows your kiddos too that it's okay for them to be human.
Yeah. Vulnerability is important. This concept of parents do no wrong, I threw that out the window, like out the gate. I tell folks all the time that I feel in a lot of ways that my son and I are raising each other because I've never been a mom before and he has never been, a child before,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
It and so we've never been with each other. So this idea of I'm learning him and he is learning me, we're learning this process together.
I love it.
And that has definitely made a lot of my parenting mistakes that I feel that are mistakes, things that I can kind of sit back and be like, ooh, it's a learning process,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
Absolutely.
that brings me to a question. If you're open to sharing, what's
Mm-hmm.
the question Gabriel has asked you, that either like caught you off guard or maybe you fumbled with? What's one of the questions around polyamory?
Oh, babies, 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 babies. My son's baby crazy, which is pretty great. But he's specifically baby crazy about me having
Oh,
babies.
wow.
And so, with each of my partners, he's just kind of like, he was just like, are you gonna have a baby with them? Because I
Mm.
really would love to have a sister. He wants a sister. It's
Oh,
very specific, and
oh,
um, it kind of threw me for a loop because he is definitely, again, it's one of these things with, it's now becoming kind of any new partner that's been around for me, a lot of my partners, they have to be around 6 months or longer before I even entertain introducing them
mhm.
to my son.
Yeah.
And so my son really is baby crazy.
No kidding.
And I'm
Oh my
like,
gosh.
dial it back. I'm
It's
not gonna have any more. I'm good.
No, you're good.
It did it. It did it.
You did it. He's the
Mm-hmm.
one. Wow, that's so
Mm-hmm.
interesting. So he's more his priority is talking about, is there going to be another baby? He wants a sister rather than about your dynamic with a partner. And I think
Yep.
that's so reflective of you normalizing the relationship system and the dynamics that you have, right? It's really
Absolutely.
beautiful. Yeah.
And
How
in our
about
current, yeah, in our current situation right now, I live with two of my partners, and my son is very much so. He wants to know where everyone is at any given time. Like who's at work, what time are they getting home, because he has things that he needs to show them, talk to them about, debrief them on, all of that. And so he probably has a better handle on the poly schedule of the house in some ways than I do,
I
you
love
know.
that so much. Oh my gosh, I love that. Yeah. He's adorable. Yeah, he was I think last time I was at your place, he was trying to show me like stuff in the backyard and he was like, this is what's going on, and he was negotiating bath, like big bath time and stuff, right? And
Yeah.
so with you,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, cool kid, really cool kid. That's awesome. Yeah. Oh, it's wonderful. Yeah, and how about, this is a question I don't think I've ever asked you, Kian, but what about breakups? Like when you break up with a partner, how does that, do you talk about that with Gabriel after the fact, like what it was like to
It's
break up with him?
yeah, it's typically it's after I had a partner that I was with off and on for almost 3 years, and he also had a kiddo. He had a little girl that was about the same age as Gabe. I think she was a year younger, and we had all gotten to be really really close. And we were talking about everyone moving in together. It was kind of a whole thing, and it ended pretty spectacularly. It ended in a way that I really don't like my relationships to end, where we can't even like move on and be friends, which was really disheartening because the kids were very close. And that
Sure.
was a difficult conversation to have, that, we're not going to see so and so anymore, and that means that we can't see, someone that was becoming a good friend of his. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it was really odd. She had a very calming effect over Gabriel. Like Gabriel would get really worked up, and she would just lay her hand on Gabriel's shoulder and be like, "It's okay," and it
Mm-hmm.
would like melt away. They
Mm-hmm.
just they communicated in a way that I haven't really seen him communicate with other kids.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like this relationship. We are probably almost 2 years removed from it, and it's still something that he comes back and he talks to me about. Like it's one of the ones that definitely he still has thoughts on, and I leave the door open for that. And my husband and I are separated, and he's been in my son's life since my son was about 3 years old, um, and that was very difficult.
Mhm.
I didn't get the opportunity to be the one to tell my son this was happening. My husband did, which is still kind of a sticky spot. My son is
Yeah.
very angry. He's very upset. He's still very confused. And he's not particularly kind to my husband when my husband comes over to visit and things like that. And we've talked about this a couple of times, and my son is just like, he didn't give me a good enough reason why he left.
Mm.
And I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
and so I don't try to force them to have any relationship that they don't want to have. Um, I think they see each other twice a week is kind of where we landed on that. But my son has really strong feelings,
Sure.
and he's allowed to have those strong feelings.
Yeah. Affirming and validating his feelings for what they are, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, and it's amazing that he can articulate too, around the backstory. I'm upset about this thing. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh.
I give him space for that. I think that's really important. Just in general, I feel like in terms of like our understanding and working with children and identifying with children, um, it feels like we're getting better and better and better at it, as opposed to looking at these little beings as extensions of ourselves or our psyches or whatever, that we're recognizing that these are human beings with their own thoughts and their own feelings. They're not accessories to our lives. These
Mm-mm.
are people who did not consent to being brought into whatever our situation is.
Right.
And so it really is our job to listen to them and help them navigate these bigger feelings. And a lot of these bigger feelings are around relationship dynamics and how we interact with people. It's
Mhm.
communication. We talk about that all the time in polyamory in general. And it truly is I feel like is the cornerstone of of like really connecting with your child. My son is ridiculously smart. I am so proud. He
Oh.
is so smart. He is the smartest little guy. My son is he's autistic, and he is probably one of the most brilliant people have ever shared space with. He just kind of gets it. Um, it's beautiful. It really is beautiful. But I'm deeply protective
Mhm.
of my child, because again, he didn't consent, and he has a right to grow up, um, to be happy, healthy, and supported. That is my job. And so if anything affects that or interferes with that, that's not something that I should be doing. So that's just kind of how I go about my sex positive parenting.
Totally.
But that's the big, like, the things that I think about all the time when it comes to this, right? Is um, there are so many other examples of non-traditional families. This is just another type, and it doesn't matter if you live together. It doesn't matter if your partner comes over and stays a couple nights a week. Whatever. These are your relationships. These are your dynamics,
Mhm.
and these are your family. These are people that you're choosing to spend time with. And so I think that teaching your kids that there are different types of families, and our family just happens to be a different type. There's no one size fit all in these situations. And people have been doing non-traditional families and intergenerational families long before we got all super excited about a mom, a dad, and
Mm.
a brother and a sister.
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
you
Yeah,
know,
and it's I think that's really beautiful that that's not it show we were talking about values a bit ago, and the way that your values are showing up is through the entire system. Woodhull Family Matters Project are it's legal advice that helps polyam families and non-traditional families, and I'd like to plug that into our resource list for folks.
mhm.
Um, we're at our time, so we're going to wrap up for the evening, but If any of you have questions, you're welcome to reach out to us via DM or email. And Key and I do this every other Wednesday at 5 o'clock. And then we have a full podcast episode, and we did our first one a couple of weeks ago with the incredible Miss Brickhouse, and it was awesome. And we actually talked for like 2 hours and about all of the things. Sex work, non-monogamy, rest, how we restore ourselves. It was legit amazing. So really, really incredible. And that is on our Patreon. And then in a couple of weeks, we're going to be interviewing Midori, who is one of my very, very dear mentors and teachers. And so the three of us will be doing a Zoom podcast. So check it out.
Yeah. I try to keep our Instagram is fairly up to date of what's going on, how you can connect, how you can get a hold of different resources involving us. Definitely check out our Patreon. Patreon gets you the early access to the podcast. Right now, our full length podcast, featuring Miss Brickhouse is a 2-hour podcast, which is not going to be the typical for our longer form podcasts. And $5 a month on Patreon, you get early access, and that includes pictures and articles and really cool stuff that we're working on kind of behind the scenes, not only just with this project, but with some other things that we do with our education and outreach and all of that fun stuff. So definitely connect with us through our Instagram and through our Patreon. Please, please, please. There's really good stuff there. Like currently, if you are a $10 level Patreon or higher, you get a discount on an education event that's coming up. And I believe it's 50% off. So it's things like that that'll be dropped there. So highly recommend you checking it out. And I'm really excited to talk with Midori because I have never met her, but I've heard so much about her. And there's all these different connections through our different communities that all roads lead back to everyone. Yes, that podcast with Brickhouse is good. It's really good. It's juicy. It's very juicy.
So juicy. That was so much fun. Yeah, that was so much fun. That was like I will remember that for the rest of my life for sure. Those couple of hours. I could have done it all day. Right? So,
it was such a good time.
And
so we'll make sure to put those different resources up there for you. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us in our DMs. Slide into the DMs and drop those questions. And we'll be doing these little mini podcasts like every other week, like Mia said. We really, really enjoy those. And you have time to catch up on all the mini podcasts. I believe this one is number 6. Is this 6?
Is it already? Oh my gosh. Wow. That's amazing.
I think it's 6. Yeah.
We started in quarantine. So
yes.
We have a lot of really awesome ones coming up.
Yeah.
So continue to join us and stay safe out there, folks. And thanks for coming here with us. We appreciate it.
Stay hydrated.
Yeah. Drink water. Exactly. Lots of water all the time.
All right. Bye, everyone. We'll catch you on the flip.
Bye.